Hi, I'm Jyoti Shah, and this is my podcast, Have You Thought About? I'm a writer who loves to find out about what passions people are pursuing, especially if they're managing to blend them together in unusual ways. In each edition, I'm going to chat with someone I find particularly interesting and who's managed to fit things together in their life or profession that you might not think of as an obvious match. Here, I'm going to speak to scientist Dr. Alina Patelli, who I met as we're both members of the UK Young Academy. Now, Alina is a responsible AI enthusiast and specialises in evolutionary computation, a type of biologically inspired artificial intelligence. Hey, Alina, it is wonderful to have you here. You are super, super smart, but you're also an AI expert. A lot of people talk about things like AI, but can you tell me a little bit more about your journey and what your research actually entails?
Hi, Drudy. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about how I developed into an AI researcher. I started in a very traditional software engineering background simply because I'm Eastern European, and at the time I was going to university, and in the culture in which I was growing up, being an engineer was one of the 5 or 6 respectable careers that parents used to encourage their children to go into. So it wasn't very much of a wide range of choices, to put it that way. Fortunately for me, I have a quite a malleable personality. I'm not the type of person that sets out with a clear cut passion. This is what I was born to do, and I know I'm predestined for this sort of trajectory. I have the kind of personality where I learn to love things as I do them and I get better at them. So, yes, in hindsight, it was a restriction. The fact that other variants, career choices weren't encouraged, weren't even acknowledged in my background, in the culture that I grew up in. But fortunately for me, I'm the type of person that just adjusts and learns to like things that they do as they experience them. So I became a software engineer after I graduated from university. And in my final year, I took a course on hybrid intelligent machines. That's what it was called, which was sort of a precursor to what we now call AI. It was a very fundamental introduction into the intelligent hardware and software available at the time. Mind you, that this was the early 2000s in Eastern Europe, so nowhere near close to the complexity that we routinely associate with AI in this country in this time. And I took to it like a duck to the water. It impressed me, it enthused me, it captivated me on so very many levels. It probably helped that the lecturer was extremely dedicated and very good at what she did and managed to convey that not only the expertise but the passion for this budding field was quite established in other parts of the world, but it was definitely incipient where I came from. It impressed me so much that I decided to make it the focus of my future career. So I did a PhD in the engineering applications of intelligent hybrid systems, which is what we used to call AI back then. And then I came to this country and I did another PhD, also in artificial intelligence, but a different brand of artificial intelligence. The one that I did in Romania was very practical. So engineering applications. It had a very straightforward outcome. The innovation happened within that realm because that's how engineering was understood in that context. But when I came here, I was given more freedom. This is your PhD, it's your research project, you get to innovate. It's your playground, it's your sandbox, as it were. Yeah, sure, there are constraints. We have to produce high quality outputs, but at the end of the day, you decide your agenda. So I took a broader approach and I did something called semantic web technologies combined with knowledge centric systems. It's about systems that self manage and use semantic technologies, ontologies, but not the philosophical kind, dictionaries for machines, but not databases, a type of dictionary for machine that uses a different kind of association between terms. They bind all that together to establish connections, links between seemingly disparate resources online and use that insight that comes from those associations to self manage, to configure themselves, to update themselves when it's needed without disrupting or with as little disruption as possible in terms of the user's activity. And then I became a lecturer slowly and steadily. I moved through several other jobs before I became a lecturer, but ultimately that is the most recent milestone in my career. And here we are.
So that is a lot of different things, but at the same time, there's still one strong pathway sort of following through. And the fact is, you seem to be a bit of a pioneer. As you say, you were learning and you were applying AI tools and the data and figuring it all out a long time before anybody else. So now when you hear people, and a lot of people talk about AI, I am an AI expert, I know this, I know that. Bearing in mind the substance that you bring, what I'd really love to know, and the audience too, and how do you take that academic approach, that pioneering approach, and then make it applicable in real life?
First of all, a pioneer is extremely humbling. I don't consider myself a pioneer. Mind you, this was a completely different context. Romania, where I'm from, in the early 2000s when I went to uni, was 20 years, 20 or so years out of communism. In the timescales of a country's history, that's barely enough time to recover from a totalitarian regime. So the access to these technologies was very limited. Our mindset, our mind frame, even though technically I was 5 years old at the time of the revolution when the communist regime fell and we turned into a democracy, though I don't remember anything. The country didn't just switch to a mature democracy overnight. I still experienced the aftershock, the consequences of the communist regime. Those weren't just political and economical, they were scientific as well. We did very high quality science and very high quality research in the Eastern Bloc. But it was limited to our resources, to mentalities, sometimes to preconceptions. So that took a toll. So I wouldn't say pioneer in those in under those circumstances, but still that was a curse and a blessing, sorry, at the same time. I've already explained why the former, but why the latter? Because it gave me a fertile ground to learn both the technical side and to learn to like the technical side as I got better at it. How did I apply the academic experience to practical outcomes? Again, this was hard and easy at the same time. It was harder than in the West because of all the constraints, delays, old fashioned, antiquated, those are polite words, sometimes, let's just be honest, obsolete ways of doing things in the Eastern Bloc compared to the modern Western democracies. So it made it harder to apply what I was doing in an academic context to improve people's lives, to put it to work in applications for social good. That made it harder, but at the same time, it was easier because social good meant something else. Well, the definitions are aligning now because it's many, many years after. The country has progressed a lot. So the people's expectations, the newer generation's expectations, are very much in line or very close, very similar to the expectations of young people in this country. But back then, people did not have the same requirements. They didn't have the same definition of life quality as they do in the West. They expected different things in the way that they defined their identities, how they related to the world of work, to their families, to their duties as citizens, to the state. Those were all different. And I was just beginning to understand what those things were. And as I understood, they form the undercurrent, the underpinning of your applications, because if you don't cater to these needs, then you won't have successful applications of your academic work. That gave me both perspectives. So also in terms of being a rigorous formal scientist on the one hand, and a learner, a citizen, a peer of society, of other people in the public realm. So experiencing how they lived their lives through my own eyes, through the lens of my family and my community, and complementing that with what I did at uni, with input from the intellectual pockets, let's put it that way, the highly trained expert people in an academic environment. And the synergy between the two was the bridge that I used to transfer over stuff that I learned at uni into applications for the public good. Just to give you an example, one of the applications was using this AI tool that I was developing, an algorithm, produce a mathematical model and then predict some indicators, some physical phenomena at work in the refinery station of a sugar factory.
Oh.
What is the social good? Better sugar. That is cheaper because it's done more effectively with a lower production cost. And you output a better quality finite product that people can benefit from. So that sounds like a menial task, but it wasn't, because the processes, the physical processes, temperature, pressure wise, that go on in the evaporation station of a factory, a food factory, are really, really complex. There is no instrument of measurement instrument that you can put in there safely. God forbid you send a human in that environment. It's not safe because of the temperatures and the vapor and the chemicals that they use to refine, clean out, to strip out byproducts in the sugar and produce the white granules that we get at the end of the assembly line. You can't monitor all of that efficiently. So the traditional way of writing down equations using the laws of thermodynamics, for instance, will work, but will only take you this far. The more complex interactions between the various physical phenomena need to be modeled in a stochastic, probabilistic way. Deterministic laws of physics are no longer accurate enough, and plus you can't measure all the things that you need as inputs for those laws. So I applied my algorithm. And on the other hand, this is your model. It's not perfect, but it's accurate enough. And it will let you control the input, how much unrefined sugar you put in, what temperature, what pressure, how do you control the parameters, your valves and faucets and levers and so on, to get cheap, high quality sugar on the other end. And it worked. We got a benefit that translated into profit for the factory, which coincidentally, through no fault of my own, went under
Eeks.
after a few years. So a better product that cost less.
But we've also previously conversed, and I've been to events where you've spoken, and you also have a really interesting example, which I think the audience would love to hear, is also about healthy habits and using sort of tools, so the tech, in a way that help you, and it's something that could be potentially scalable, right?
Sure. I am not a very big fan of binary thinking, which may come as a shock given my job. Everything is binary in computing. Well, the advent of quantum computing is going to change that, but we're still far. Well, I don't know how far, but we're a ways off from the practical realization of that. So now, until now, sorry, the typical implementation of all computing systems is in binary zeros and ones and so on, and that's no coincidence. This is how we think at our most fundamental level, because we were hunter gatherers for a long, long time in our evolution, for much longer than we've been a techno physical society as we are right now. The hardware in our brains hasn't had time to adjust. The software has, surely, but the hardware is still very much binary. Fight or flight, which used to be very, very helpful when we were fighting off tigers and picking fruit and fending for ourselves on the savannah, but not very useful now when the conditions of our lives are much more subtle and nuanced and complicated. And this is where habit formation comes into play. It's about using those impulses that we have, because don't get me wrong, binary thinking is not wrong, it's useful. Those impulses, fight or flight, and so will save your life even today in an extreme situation. So we should not repress them, but we should control them. We should make them work for us rather than against us, rather than those impulses limiting our creativity and our range of options. And this is educated, self educated, or educated or with the help of others. institutional help at school, in various societies and structured environments, influence from your family, influence from your society, with the help of AI tools that support healthy habit formation. And that applies to all areas of your life, with eating, diet, exercise, the way that you see the world. It's incredibly surprising, at least it was for me, when you come to think of the possibilities you intrinsically rule out when you approach a situation, whatever that might be, from a binary point of view. This is either going to turn out great or it's going to be a total disaster. Most people even shift between those two extreme scenarios. I am ridden by guilt, self guilt today, and I consider myself a total failure. Or tomorrow, I'm very happy and pleased with myself, and I settle. I stop making progress because I'm so satisfied with my achievements of late. At least that happens to me. Sometimes I oscillate madly between those two scenarios, and it's not helpful. It's draining, first of all. So, how did I manage to fix that? By imposing a mental discipline on myself and teaching myself with exercise and practice to see that between those extremes, there is a whole spectrum of possibilities. Think about it in terms of sliding scales. Binary thinking is like a switch on and off, and the spectrum is a sliding scale where you have trade offs between a healthy amount of stress regarding your failures, a healthy amount of self criticism regarding your shortcomings, and a healthy amount of accomplishment, being happy with your achievements and satisfied with where you are. If you manage to tune the balance between the two, then at the same time, you will be grateful for what you've achieved and use that to drive future progress. But don't settle, but don't get yourself caught in the circle of guilt and reminisce on past failures, because that's not productive. And to train that balance, which is not fixed, because that's another trap that I usually fall into. Okay, so I have my extremes. Extremes are bad. Split the difference. That's the trade off in the middle. No, 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 no. You just turned a binary space into a 3-point deterministic space. That's not much improvement. It's the infinite spectrum of trade offs, which you get to settle on every day, every moment. It shifts, it slides, and that's natural. And with practice, and this is what I understand by good, healthy habit creation, you learn to control that dynamic of the sliding scale. And you learn to settle on the ideal trade off that may apply this day, this minute, in this current situation.
Does that tie in then with how you're learning to manage those conflict situations where, yeah, you've got the reason, you've got the science brain, you've got, let's figure this out analytically, and then you've got the human, you've got the emotion, you've got the intense situations, which aren't always about healthy habits. They could be about being in spaces where people are confusing, or when people are doing things, or something is happening which is very intense. So how are you navigating that?
The first trick that I've learned is do not repress, manage. The first instinct, at least the first instinct that I have when I get these urges, when the monkey brain sticks its head to the surface and sometimes or tries to overpower the rational brain. The first instinct that I have is to kick it back down. No, you shut up. You stop talking. You are bad. No, 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 no. The primal instincts that we have, sometimes fear, for instance, that's the best example. When we fear an unknown situation, I've never been in this context before. My God, I'm going to fail miserably. I'm going to make a fool of myself. What will other people think? That's the monkey brain. And my first instinct is, you shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. The rational brain tells me that I'll be fine because I'm experienced. And no, that will create even more stress. The trick is manage that impulse. Make it work for you. Fear is useful as long as you don't let it turn into panic, and then it controls you instead of you controlling it. You need to do that quickly because you don't have time in an unknown situation where you need to react on the spot and find that balance point really fast. You don't have time to philosophize on binary versus continuums and so on. When you need to make a quick decision, then the first question that I ask myself is, what does fear teach me in this moment? How can I use this fear to keep myself on my toes, to make myself productive, to inform my decision making in collaboration with my rational thought? And the answer is not immediate. I can't give you a recipe. That varies from situation to situation. But by training yourself to have that mindset when you approach new situations, you will fail. It won't work straight off the bat. But by doing it repeatedly and learning from past failures, you will get better. That's how I find my trade-off in new situations. Do not repress, manage your instincts and make them work in collaboration or in tandem with your rational thought, your critical processes in your higher order intellectual circuitry, to put it that way, in order to find the right trade-off in your specific situation.
And you have that element of the trade-offs. And again, there seems to be a degree of like, what can you control? What can you put forward? But as someone who is involved in science, and again, that element of something that's actually relatively new and very much evolving in terms of the fields that you're in, how do you deal with situations when there's rejection or something doesn't work out, or say you've applied for something, or say you think this is, I know that I'm doing something absolutely brilliant, but not everybody understands it yet because they're not at the level that they can understand it. It's not, how are you dealing with stuff like that?
That is a fantastic question. I gave the example of fear previously. Another very good example is pain. The kind of pain that you feel when you get rejected. If you get rejected in a romantic relationship, if you get rejected in a professional setting, as in you write an application and the reviewer say no. If you get rejected in a social situation, and that happens, is very familiar when we are teenagers and we try to fit in with our cool friends and we fail miserably. And they just fan us off. You go away. You're not worthy enough to be in our super posh, super cool circles and so on. Everyone has experienced that. That's rejection.
Oh, yeah.
What I used to do that was very bad because it made me feel even worse is give in to that pain. Good Lord, I'm a failure. I will never fit in with these cool people. Or I am hopeless. My intellect is not developed enough. I'll never be smart enough for these reviewers. Or I am unlovable. This person has rejected me because I am too fat, too stupid. I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to behave in social circumstances. I'm an embarrassment in public and all these things. This is how I reacted to rejection. Extreme, I know. But in time, I've managed to use those impulses to build painstakingly a better, more constructive reactions. So, okay, there are things that I did wrongly. I didn't get rejected just because I'm a misunderstood genius. It's I am perfect and everybody else is stupid, so they don't understand what I did, so that's why they rejected my application. No. You have to acknowledge that part of the blame is yours. However, it's not that you're not good enough. Most of the time in romantic relationships, social relationships, professional relationships, when you get rejected, it's not just a matter of quality, it's a matter of fit. They are looking for something different, not necessarily something better. You're not necessarily bad. Of course, there are some things that you can improve, but you are not a good fit for their shape that they're trying to fill. And that is particularly relevant to the emotional context. It's not that you're not a good human. It's just that that person is looking for something else. And that doesn't make you bad. You will be a good fit for someone else, but not for this person. But you fail to see that in the heat of the moment when rejection hurts. But by reflecting on that pain, you ultimately, or at least I did, come to that conclusion. That was how I found my trade-off when I dealt with rejection. By realizing with practice and mental discipline that it's not always, not entirely, partly it is, but not entirely a matter of quality, but a matter of fit.
And that was Dr. Alina Patelli. Do you have an interdisciplinary life? Because I would love to hear from you, and perhaps we can chat on this podcast that goes with my newsletter, which is called Have You Thought About? It can be found via www.druthishah.com. Please join me next time for a fun conversation with another guest who likes to mix up lots of things in their life. Do listen to past episodes and rate and review the podcast if you've enjoyed it. Thank you to Rian Shah for the music.